Welcome to Loup TV. This is a big one. I'm your guest, Gene Munster. This is the first time in any of the Loup episodes that I've been a formal guest. The host today is our own Andrew Murphy. Andrew, take it away.
All right, the topic is Tesla and the run up in share price over the last year and over the last month. Lots to talk about, so we'll dive right in. Gene, if you rewind a year and look at the way the stock has moved over the last year, we've seen an 800% appreciation before last month, and then it was up 40% in the last 30 days. So the first question is, what's driving the stock at these levels?
You need to think about the 800 and the 40 as two separate topics, separate themes. And the 800 piece, what drove it really was the company made progress for several years around EV and autonomy and didn't get much credit for it. And so I think that there was a little bit of a catch up as part of that. And on top of that, you had a bull market. On top of that, futuristic tech did well. So I think the combination of those, but the big picture here is Tesla made a lot of progress for a long time, did not get much credit for investors, and then they did a catch up. The last month has been a surprise to me. And the two factors which have driven it have been the delivery growth, and separately is some of the changing dynamics in Washington.
Okay, so that's what's driving market sentiment. How about in your mind, what are the key changes that have been going on recently in the Tesla story?
So I really see there's four key changes coming up. I think three of them are on the positive side and one of them is on the negative side. And I think I'll just quickly bring it full circle to the end, is that I'm still optimistic about the Tesla story. I think that somebody who trades this should be very careful. It is a dangerous stock to trade. But to answer your question, what are those four things that have changed? I think the first is this delivery number, the up 61% for December compared to the rest of the auto industry, which was down 5%. Remarkable that they continue to grow. That is an acceleration of growth and an acceleration of the gap between traditional auto. Tesla does make just a handful of cars. They're 500,000 last year, so it's small when you compare it to 10, 15, almost 20 million in some cases, but it is a growth rate that exceeds the industry nonetheless. So I think that's one piece that has been a positive surprise in the past month. The second is the kind of the governing bodies. What happened in Georgia, those two Senate seats actually create a tailwind for Tesla, in part because some of President-elect Biden's plans for EVs and renewable energy could restart EV tax credits for Tesla, which they have not enjoyed for the better part of a year, which would lower the price of Teslas by about 10%. And separately, I think you could even see some of their solar business. You could see federal tax credits for people putting solar on top of their roofs, which obviously Tesla has a solar business. And so that is something that's measurable and a positive development over the past month. And then the last piece on the positive side, which I don't think you hear much about, is what their progress that they've made on full self-driving. It's in these kind of advanced betas, but those people that are using full self-driving advanced beta are doing some incredible things, like a drive from LA to San Francisco, doing off ramps, turns. It's quite remarkable. And it's something that I think would be a positive factor to the Tesla story this year. But I bury the lead in those three. And the big picture, what really has changed in this story is Apple. And we've long said that Apple is the biggest competitive risk to Tesla. And I stand by that. I think that this is a massive market. Both companies can do well, but this is really setting up over the next few years for this really incredible collision between the two companies.
So I know you work closely on Apple and spend a lot of time on Tesla. It seems like Apple is growing as a competitive threat for Tesla. Can you explain why?
Well, any explanation needs a warning that I've been famously wrong on expecting that Apple would come up with a TV. And long time I prophesized that that would happen. It never saw the light of day. It was a cautionary reminder for me that what Apple's working on doesn't see the light of day. It's become more clear over the past couple of weeks, 3 weeks, that Apple does have ambitions to build a branded car. I'm not saying that it will see the light of day. And the timing seems to be around this 2024, 2025 timeframe. I think that that is a big deal. Taking out the prediction piece, will Apple, will they not have a car, is almost a secondary question for Tesla shareholders today. I think the primary question is, will there be more talk of what Apple's going to do in a car or broader transportation over the past year? And I think that answer for me is a clear yes. And I think that another important part of this topic is that the future of the car is not a traditional automobile. It's not just an electrification of what we have. This is truly a computer on wheels, which sets up for companies like Apple and Tesla to be particularly well positioned for that. And so even though Apple hasn't done a thing in auto beyond being in testing and the R&D phase for the last 8 years, they should be taken seriously. And so I think that's an important piece here, is that all the kind of core components, whether it's some vertical integration with hardware, software, what they're doing around AI, the design piece around a car, I think Apple's got an opportunity here, which will, I think, have a near-term impact. Hard to predict when it's going to happen on shares of Tesla.
So, as a longtime watcher of Apple, for some of the Tesla audience may not be as familiar, you do think that where there's smoke, there's fire. It seems like these rumors have credence, and Apple is investigating the launch of a car.
They are, and I think one piece that we believe is that they just don't want to do something Me Too. They don't want to do a Me Too EV, for example, whether it's something around autonomy or the fleet piece is something that is particularly powerful. We've talked about what Tesla is doing in robotaxis, and I think Apple will likely have some of the same ambitions. They have an opportunity. Don't forget, they own about 5% of Didi. This is the Uber of China. They've owned it for a long time, and I suspect that there's probably some learnings that they could take around ride sharing from Didi that they could apply, and that is really accelerates beyond the $2 trillion annual car spend, new car spend, to even a bigger market opportunity is around just the movement of people. And so I think Apple can kind of play into that. I just want to pause there for a second and just give kind of an encouraging point to both Tesla and Apple. I want to be clear, I still believe that Tesla can go much higher. We can talk about that in a second here. But just to think about the market, the addressable market here, the smartphone market, new smartphones a year is about a $500 billion market. Apple will do probably 200 or so, 180 billion or so in iPhone hardware revenue this year. The car market, I mentioned 2 trillion. And then on top of that, the transportation, this is just a much bigger market. And so, there can be room for new players with Apple. And if you consider Tesla a new player there too.
All right. So, take it home for us. Net. How do you think about the share price, maybe over the near term and over the long term? And I have seen that you've talked about a $2,500 target for Tesla shares over a long-term period. Do you still stand by that?
So the $2,500 longer term target, I do still stand by that, but there's an important change in terms of how long I think it's going to take to get there. I've talked about a 3-year plus kind of a time frame, and I think that it's probably more 5 years plus. I think that what we're seeing here with Apple is going to add some stress to Tesla's multiple. It's hard to predict when that's going to happen. And so I ultimately believe that this market, we talked about the size of the market, is enough to substantiate Tesla being a much bigger market cap than it is today. But this Apple thing is a big deal. And I think that should be factored in and is going to create some waves to get there. And so I'm changing that kind of 3-year plus window, updating that to a 5-year plus window. And ultimately, I think that another aspect of this too, we talk about Tesla's valuation. This should be a step up in Apple's valuation as well, just the size of this market. Again, they got to come out with a product there. We're years away from that happening, but I think that this is something that can absolutely move the needle for Apple. And so that's where, I don't know, did that seem to come through? Is it kind of clear where I stand there, Andrew?
Yeah. So, give us a 1-year outlook and maybe a 5-year outlook on whether or not you'd own the stock.
So for a year time frame, if you're trading this for a year, I would not do that. I think that is a dangerous endeavor, in part because it's just hard to predict when different news events are going to come out. For example, if the market was going to take a pullback, I think shares of Tesla would probably be more penalized if there was a broader market pullback. And that's hard to predict if that's going to happen in the next year. And so my sense is that if you take an approach of trying to figure out what something is going to do in the next year, would not own Tesla. If you take an approach of like truly investing, believing, and I would consider that 3 years plus, I would absolutely own this company. I think that not only what they're going to do around EVs, I think what they're going to do around autonomy is significant. I think applying their technologies into new markets, whether it is within insurance, whether it's what they're doing in solar, robo taxis, HVAC, I think really continues to open up new addressable markets. So I'm right there, but want to be clear that as for the next year, I think it's all bets are off trying to figure out what this stock does. But for the next 3 years plus, I still believe it moves higher.
All right. Well, for Gene, I'm going to wrap it up there. Gene, thanks as always for your insights
Thank
on
you.
Tesla and your insights on Apple and how they're interacting together going forward here. Appreciate it. For Loup, I'm Andrew.